everyone, good morning to those from Europe and good afternoon to those from Asia. So I'm honest, I guess most of you are very familiar with me and Francesca after 3 webinars in the past 3 weeks. So here comes to the last webinar, the 4th one that we're going to do in this month. So it has been a very pleasant journey doing the webinar for all of you since that we have received a lot of good feedback and we are very glad to hear all the positive comments from you. So in today's last webinar, so Francesca is going to talk about major standard and industry initiatives for environmental assessment in the industry. So, and I believe all of you are very familiar with the rules, so you are muted. So if you want to raise questions, please type your questions in the question box. If you don't have, so I will leave the time now to Francesca. Over to you, please, Francesca.
Yes, Fiona, thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see that you are still a lot of people being connected to attend the webinars. So this is the last webinar of the series. So the last topic is about major standards and initiatives regarding environmental assessment. I'm Francesca Giometti. I'm the Senior Environmental Advisor and the Training Manager for Eurofins AQM. During this presentation, we will have some anonymous polls and we will have time at the end of the session for question and answer. And as usual, this webinar is recorded and you can find the recording on our YouTube channel. So, what are we going to discuss about today? As you know, there are a lot of certifications, a lot of standards, a lot of initiatives around environmental assessment. And it is not always easy to understand what is the scope of these initiatives and which one will be more adapted based on what you want to do. So I cannot present all of them, unfortunately, because we have a limited time, but I made a selection. So I'm going to talk today about ISO 40001. Then I have selected some example of quite famous assessment tools, such as Amfori BEPI, Higg FEM, and others. So I will of course explain what is the meaning of BEPI, what is the meaning of FEM, everything will be clearly explained. Then I decided to focus as well on some industry initiatives and what are some important environmental organizations. So you might already be aware of what is ZDHC, Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals, which is renamed Roadmap to Zero. But maybe you don't know what is IPE. But if you are sourcing from China and if you have a lot of suppliers in China, I think it's very interesting for you to look at IPE platform. I will explain it later. And finally, I have a selection of very few standard and certifications that I want to go through today. Let's start with ISO 40001. So, Fiona, can we have the first poll? We have 2 questions to ask you today about ISO 40001. So remember that this is anonymous, so don't be afraid that your answer is incorrect. There is no way to know who is answering. First question, is ISO 40001 certification a guarantee of 100% compliance with all environmental legislation applicable to the factory? True, false, so I don't know. Second question, getting ready to implement and maintain the ISO 40001 certification requires a lot of administrative work. Is it true? Is it false? Or I don't know.
Yeah, I see people are voting fast, but I think they will need some time to think over the 2 factors.
Yes.
Okay, so we have about 80% vote, so let's see the result.
Yes, thank you, Fiona. Okay, so you should be able all to see the poll results. So the majority answered fails to the first question. And for the second question, the majority answered true. Okay, let's look at the first question. So indeed, the correct answer to the question is fails. Why is it fails? So the ISO 40001 is a management system, and actually it requires the factory to identify all the environmental legislation applicable to the factory. It means that ISO 40001 certification guarantee that the factory has a system for identification and let's say the monitoring of what are the legal requirements applicable to the factory. However, it is not a guarantee of 100% compliance with these legal requirements. And this is something very important to keep in mind about the ISO 40001. ISO 40001 is a guarantee of a process implemented in the factory, not the guarantee of a result. Okay, second question. Indeed, getting ready to implement and maintain the ISO 40001 certification does require a lot of administrative work. Indeed, I'm going to discuss about this, but a factory willing to obtain the ISO 40001 must be aware that it's going to be a huge, I would say, amount of work. And it's not only about documentation, but indeed, many documents and procedures and policy are required for ISO 40001. Okay, we can close the poll and go ahead. So what is ISO 40001? This is an international standard for the environmental management system in an organization. So it can be implemented in any type of organization, can be office or headquarter and manufacturing site. What is the scope of ISO 40001? The first one is, of course, the identification of legal requirements and every requirements from stakeholders applicable to the factory. And this is what we call the context of the organization. Then there is an important chapter about leadership. It means that during an ISO 40001 audit, much attention will be given to to which extent the top management is involved in the strategy regarding environmental objectives. And this is very interesting, actually, and I totally indeed insist on this. When we do environmental audits, this is one point of ISO 40001 that we do check. We want to be sure that the top management demonstrates its commitment to the environmental objectives. Otherwise, it will be difficult to see a good implementation of environmental practices. Other chapters in these standards are about the planning and action plan to achieve environmental objectives. Another chapter is about the resources that are allocated to achieve environmental objectives, being sure that there are appointed people in the management responsible of different tasks related to the environmental management system. There is the communication internally and externally. Then there is as well everything related to operational controls and emergency preparedness. And what is also very interesting in ISO 40001 is the performance evaluation. It means that the factory must do some self-assessment to always try to improve and to always evaluate what can be done better. So this is very interesting as well in ISO 40001. So what are the pros and cons of ISO 40001? It is a well-known and international standard. It provides a framework to help the factory getting organized to address environmental issues. Organization, this is a key point. And based on my experience visiting factories, I must say that I noticed organization is a major problem. So it's true that ISO 40001 could really help to have a good organization within the management to address environmental issues. As I said, the demonstration of commitment from top management is also a really good aspect of ISO 40001. And of course, it guarantees that the factories has a certain number of policies, procedures, action plans. So this is as well very good, as I said, in terms of organization. However, ISO 40001 requires a lot of administrative work. And in particular, it requires a lot of time and resources to keep updating the policies, procedures, action plan, etc. So according to me, I would say that it will be difficult for a factory to go for ISO 40001 if we can say the factory is starting from scratch regarding environmental topics, because it is a heavy process. So I think, yes, the factory should first be aware of environmental risk in the factory. They should first start having a good identification of the legal requirements, a first identification of the buyer's expectations, looking at what is done in the industry. This should be the beginning. If the factory, since the beginning, wants to start with ISO 40001, I think it's going to be a bit difficult for them to achieve this. So don't go too fast. And finally, be careful about the certifications when delivered in countries where we know there is a high level of corruption. Be careful. Of course, ISO 40001 is a very strong standard, but I recommend you to investigate a minimum. If you ask a factory, do you have an ISO 40001 certification? And the factory answers yes, and they send you the certificate, this is not enough. You should absolutely ask for some evidence that this ISO 40001 certification is, let's say, reliable. If you can go on site, of course, this is the best solution. You can immediately see asking, okay, can you show me your action plan for environmental objectives? Can you show me the minutes of your meetings with the top management to discuss about environmental topics? Can you show me that what is in the action plan is actually implemented on site? If the factory is facing, how can I say, if the factory is not comfortable to show you these documents and not comfortable to show you what actions have been implemented, that's a problem. It's not possible that you got the certification and that you are not able to demonstrate what has been done. If you cannot go on site, I recommend you to ask through email, ask the factory to send you some key documents again, the policy, the environmental policy, the environmental action plan, the job description of the person in charge of environment, and so on. This evidence will help you to assess if this certification is reliable or not. Okay, let's go to the next chapter. Now we are going to talk about two famous environmental assessment tools. So Fiona, we can please have the second pool. So we are here going to ask you two questions. First, I want to know if you are aware, a minimum, about what the Amfori Solution for Environmental Assessment, BEPI, and the Higg Index of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Do you know if they both offer self-assessment solutions? And then I want to have your opinion about which initiative, which tool do you think is how can I say, yes, the one factories might be more familiar with? Okay, so
yeah, it's getting almost to 80%. So
okay.
I think we can see the result.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So question one, 50% of the respondents indicated that it is true that both tools, BEPI and Higg FEM, they do offer self-assessment solutions. This is indeed true. They don't only propose self-assessment tool, but indeed they propose as part of other solution. Regarding the second question, so this is of course based on, so you are more or less 100% answering this questionnaire. So among this 100%, we can say that almost 50% consider that the Higg is the tool which factories are more familiar with. I do agree with this. Of course, it is also based on your personal experience and personal, yes, I mean, what you know about the industry, but still I think this answer is quite representative of what I could also hear in the industry. Why Higg is maybe the most well-known one? I think it is one of the first tool that was used in environmental assessment. This is probably why, and also because it is used by many big brands. Okay, so thank you everyone for answering. So let's start indeed with this one, the Higg FEM. So initially the name was Higg Index. Now the name is Higg FEM, which means Facility Environmental Module. This was created by the SAC, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. So it is specific to apparel and footwear. And they have 3 tools available, one for the company, one for the manufacturer, and one for the product. They also have a tool for social compliance. The Higg FEM is the tool for manufacturer, and indeed, initially, it was only a self-assessment tool. As I mentioned during a previous webinar, the scope of this self-assessment is very similar to the general environmental topics list. So I just repeat briefly what are these topics: environmental management system, water, energy, chemical management, wastewater management, solid and hazardous waste, and emissions to air. So initially it was only a self-assessment. It means that the factory has to complete a questionnaire, and then this questionnaire result is available on a platform. This is a platform that all the SAC members can access. Since recently, SAC decided to propose a verification service. So it's interesting because you see, they use the term verification, not audit. This is very, very interesting, and we can mention that I guess it is based on the feedback and experience with social auditing, because there are some, I mean, some comments such as, is the audit the best way to make factories make improvements? Is the audit also always, how can I say, the most effective solutions to assess the factory's performance? So this is interesting with environmental assessment tools, but they want to try a different approach. And probably they don't want too much to focus on audit, but they want to say that we are testing new solutions. For example, the self-assessment is a way to give a responsibility to the factory about assessing the performance. It's a kind of different approach, but at the end, still there is the need to verify that, of course, the information is accurate. So this is why at a certain point, the verification or audit, we can say, will be in any case needed. So to come back to the topic of Higg FEM, we have initially a self-assessment tool. Now we have verification. So it means that SAC will qualify some, we can call them auditors, verifiers, to be responsible to be authorized to do the verification of Higg FEM. So the SAC is mostly, and Higg is mostly known and used by US brands and North Europe. It's true that it is less used and less well known in, I would say, Central Europe and South of Europe. There is a platform for the members to see the data collected. They are aligned with ZDHC requirements. This is indeed also a trend we observe in the industry regarding environmental aspect. This is very positive that many initiatives and standards try to be aligned one with each other. This is a good news. I will explain now, but ZDHC is about the chemical management in the factory and about the solutions to get rid of hazardous chemicals. Higg FEM is also, the Higg also have trainings. So it means in the production countries, they can offer trainings to explain how to use the Higg FEM. Okay, now we are going to talk about another assessment solution, which is Amfori BEPI. So I'm sure you know the famous BSCI, the tool for social assessment from the Foreign Trade Association. So the Foreign Trade Association was renamed Amfori in 2018. And so they created as well a tool for environment. The name is BEPI, which means Business Environmental Performance Initiative. And again, they don't want to call this, this is for them not an audit. It is a kind of package of solutions. So what do they propose? They propose again the self-assessment. Then they propose an assessment, but you see this is only one possible solution. So they don't want to insist on saying you must do environmental audits. No, they say this is one among different options that you have to monitor your factory's environmental performance. Other solutions are what they call the improvement phase with the support of consultants going on site. This means that BEPI will give you access to a list of approved consultants that can support factories on site, but you need to pay for the consultants to do the job on site. Then you have a chemical management module, which means that there is a kind of audit questionnaire specifically for chemical management, and they do as well the wastewater and sludge testing. And another solution is capacity building. They provide e-learning and workshops. So this is, you see, a kind of toolbox. And their position is to say, okay, you can join as a member BEPI. By the way, you can join only, you can join Amfori only to use BEPI. If you join BEPI, you have access to the self-assessment for free. You have the capacity building, which is free, and the other services you need to pay based on the fee of the auditors and consultants and so on. So again, there is a platform for the monitoring of activities undertaken for each supplier. So they have very visual reporting, can you imagine? And they have as well a partnership with MyClimate to calculate the carbon footprint of the factory, but this is based on the data collected in the self-assessment. Very important, it is based on self-assessment. Okay. Okay, there are other audit solutions. Of course, audit companies such as Eurofins AQM author environmental audits, other companies as well. What is important according to me is that for you, if you are a buyer, a retailer or a brand, you need to have your checklist of what are your criteria to select an audit solution. So I'm proposing some criteria, but of course you have to pick the criteria which are the most suitable for you and your company. For example, a criteria to select your audit standard could be how well known is the audit standard in the industry. You might want to be sure that the audit standard you are using is at least aligned with what is well known in the industry. For example, aligned with ZDHC, this could be an asset. To what extent the audit questionnaire is detailed and accurate enough to analyze critical aspects related to chemical management, wastewater, etc. This is my advice. I think the initiatives, the big ones, have the advantage that they offer a platform, monitoring tools. So this is the great asset. But I still think you need to really question them about how detailed is the audit questionnaire and how well do they analyze the most critical topics. This is very, very important. Another point is to check how the auditor skills are assessed. What is the qualification system for auditors? So whatever is the organization you contact, ask them, how do you qualify auditor for environmental audits? That's very important. How practical are the corrective action plans? I mentioned this in my previous webinars. The environmental topics are still new for many factories, so the auditor must give some short explanations about the topic. You cannot only say the factory should have a policy, that's the end. No, you need to be a little bit more detailed, because otherwise we won't see big progress. So the explanation is quite important, and I think a corrective action plan which is detailed is a good corrective action plan, more practical, I mean. The platform for monitoring could be a criteria for you. If you have a huge number of suppliers that you are auditing, of course, having a good monitoring tool is important. But at the contrary, if you have only few suppliers, you're going to audit against an environmental standard, maybe the platform at this stage is less useful. What support do you get to analyze the audit results? This is also important because we are saying that the environmental topic is new for the factories, but it's also new for you, for the people who needs to read the report. So getting some support from the organization, I guess, is very important. The reactivity of the organization and the clarity of the explanation they can provide to you is a very, very important aspect. So you need to make sure that there is a contact person within the organization or the audit company that will be able to answer all of your questions and have this expertise from the ground. That's very important. Okay, so this is a suggestion of criteria. You should have your own criteria list, and this will help you to choose your audit standard. Okay, now let's talk about organization and support they can propose. We have a last pool about ZDHC and IPE. So Fiona is going to open the last pool. Thank you, Fiona. Okay, so first question, does ZDHC, Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemical, propose an audit protocol? And second question, I would like to know if you have ever heard about IPE, Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs.
Okay, so let's see the result.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Okay, that's interesting. So to the first question, majority, but still it's not, it's 44% of respondents indicating true to the question one, but yes, it's not a huge majority, but And to the second question, okay, I see that half of the respondent have no idea about what is IP. Okay, so first question about ZDHC. The answer is actually fails. ZDHC is not proposing an audit protocol. I will explain exactly what is ZDHC, but that's very important that you don't associate ZDHC to an audit protocol. What you might have heard about is other companies or organizations telling you we can offer an audit to help you with ZDHC MRSL compliance. We have an audit which is aligned with ZDHC requirements, okay? But this is different. It means that ZDHC, the organization, if you go on the website, you will find a lot of tools, a lot of guidelines, but there is no audit protocol. Okay, I will go in details about this. Second question about IPE. So I will explain what is IPE, as indeed a majority is not aware of this organization. Okay, so roadmap to zero. This is a brand's initiative started in 2011, because what happened at this time, Greenpeace published a report about the pollution in the wastewater, in the water sources around the factories. And this Greenpeace campaign was denouncing the pollution from the textile industry. In particular, Greenpeace identified different hazardous chemicals from the textile industry. And the brands decided to create an initiative to answer to Greenpeace attack and to demonstrate that they wanted to work on the reducing the discharge of hazardous chemicals. What is the objective of this initiative? They want to provide support to the apparel and footwear industry to get rid of hazardous chemicals in the production. That's very important. We are talking about what is going on at the level of the production. Remember that nowadays, most of the brands, retailers are still focusing on the final product. They want to be sure there is no hazardous chemical residues in the final product, okay? But this initiative is focusing on what is going on at the level of the production. It means they don't want to see hazardous substances entering in the factory. So the initiatives collaborate with brands, chemical suppliers, manufacturers, and other organizations. So this is indeed interesting and a strength of this organization, that they're not just working with factories or not just working with brands, they are involving chemical industry and other organizations in this debate. In 2014, the first ZDHC manufacturing restricted substances list was released. Okay, so the key tool of ZDHC is this, is a list of restricted substances that we don't want to see in the manufacturing. That's the main tool that this initiative is offering. Recently, they have published the new version of this MRSL, so we call it the ZDHC MRSL version 2.0. This is open source, so you can go on the website and you can have access to this ZDHC MRSL. You don't need to be a member to have access to the MRSL. And the MRSL online is done in a way that you can do some research. For example, if you have the name of a chemical of a substance, or if you have a CAS number of a substance, you can go on the website and you can check if this CAS number is in the MRSL or not. Then they do offer other guidelines and tools. For example, there is a ZDHC MRSL conformance guidance. There is as well what they call the Gateway Chemical Module. This is an online tool to find alternatives to hazardous chemicals. This gateway is for the members for the moment. I think they have in mind at a certain point to give access to the gateway to any factory. Maybe they need to pay a small fee, but for the moment the gateway is for the members. So what is the idea of this online tool is helping the factories to identify alternatives to hazardous chemicals. You have other platforms you can find online to find alternatives. There is not only this one, but there is also this one. You have also some chemical suppliers proposing some chemical positive list. You have many tools. We could have a discussion specifically about this, but in any case, remember that ZDHC is specifically focusing on providing guidance and tools to help the industry to get rid of hazardous chemicals in the production. They don't do audits. You cannot contact ZDHC to ask to perform a ZDHC audit. Okay, this is not possible, but other organizations could support you in achieving the objectives of ZDHC. ZDHC has as well, for example, a guideline for the wastewater. It means they have defined a standard for the water quality after treatment. Why did they propose this? Actually, you have standards for every country, but you can have many differences from a country to another, and it might be difficult to be very clear about which standard is applicable in which situation. It can be a headache. In any case, ZDHC wanted to propose a standard for the apparel, the textile and footwear industry. Okay, IPE, so the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs. This is a non-profit organization in China, which started in 2006. This is not specific to textile industry. It means that the scope of this organization is applicable to all the industrial sectors. So brands can use IP's China Pollution Map database to see available pollution data disclosed by the government about production sites everywhere in the country. So that's a very interesting tool because it's free of cost. You go on IP's website and you click on the map, and you have a map of China, and you can have access to all the public, let's say, information collected by the government about the factory compliances with regulations. So the topics are about air pollution, water, soil, and carbon. And I know that recently they started as well to have a specific program regarding water and energy. So even through the IPE, if you have suppliers in China, if you use IPE, you might be able to collect data about your factories' water and energy consumptions. What they want to do, IPE, is to link multinational corporations to their suppliers' environmental performance. Why do they do this? Because, of course, this is a way to make a ranking of the major corporation based on the environmental performance of their factories. And this is published by IPE. It is a way, of course, to push the corporations to take responsibility for what is going on in their supply chain, and to make them encourage the factories to take actions when there is any violation against environmental compliance aspect. The idea is that corporation will encourage factories to correct the violation and demonstrate that they are compliant. This is an example of a map. You can see, so until recently, maybe IPE was, okay, mostly known, of course, in China, but as well because everything was in Chinese. Now I know they are working on translating most of the information in English, and still if you have local teams in China, yes, it could be good to let them know about this map of IPE, so you can collect some information about your suppliers. Okay, last part is about other standards and certifications. So we don't have time to present all of them in details, but why I selected these ones, because I want to insist on the importance of a good identification of the scope of the standard. You know, I guess, I mean, I imagine a lot of people are aware of Ecotech Standard 100, which is a very famous standard for the garment regarding the compliance with restricted substances list. As you see, this is about the final product. So it's not a guarantee that the factory is not using restricted substances, because the substance could be in the factory, in the process, and at the end, it is not on your product. So you are compliant and you can get this standard, okay? But if you don't want the hazardous substances to enter in the factory, you need to have other ways to check this. For example, okay, I will talk about the Eco Passport later, but if we look at Ecotech STEP, this is a different standard. It's a different certification from Ecotech, and it is indeed for the factory scope. It means that with Ecotech STEP, you are assessing the practice of the factory, whatever is the production, whatever is the product being produced. STEP is a very, how can I say, comprehensive approach, because they are not only targeting the environmental aspect, but as well health and safety, social aspect, and quality. So it's very complete, and this one will assess the factory scope. Then you have Ecotex Eco Passport. This is a certificate for the chemical product. So indeed, if you are working on a MRSL, a manufacturing restricted substances list, you might be interested in this kind of certificate, because this certificate guarantees that your chemical product entering in the factory doesn't contain hazardous substances. I'm mentioning GOTS because I want to insist that this is for the textile made from organic fibers. It is for the product. So you have a label for the final product, and you have GOTS certification for the factory. What does it mean that a factory is GOTS certified? It means that the factory has a dedicated line and a dedicated, let's say, storage process, dedicated, yes, flow of product to make sure this product is not going to be contaminated by non-organic fibers. Okay, it doesn't mean that if your factory is GOTS certified, your factory is compliant with all the environmental requirements. It's not as easy and simple. It's true that GOTS has requirements that the factory must have an effluent treatment plant. There are as well some social requirements, but the focus of GOTS is making sure your product is not going to be contaminated by non-organic fibers. That's the major point. So I would say that if you want to have a tool to control very well the environmental performance of the factory, you cannot only rely on GOTS. Remember that GOTS is for a specific topic, which is organic fibers. And finally, LEED. I'm mentioning this one because in Bangladesh, many factories are mentioning we are LEED Platinum, LEED something. LEED is for the factory building. So it's mostly about how environmental friendly is the building, the water and energy consumption. This will be the scope. So indeed, it's covering part of an environmental audit, but not a full scope. Okay, I think for today, this is a good introduction. So I'm going to stop my presentation here, and let's see the questions we have.
Yeah, thank you, Francesca. So while Francesca is reviewing the questions, we have a couple of hands already. And so I just want to let you know that in case you're not aware, we have all the webinars recording up at our YouTube channel. And you just need to search your business student to find our channel. And also we have a linking page that you can follow and become our friends so that you can see what we are going to do next time. So at the moment we are going to do webinar tomorrow as well. So we will talk about it, but it's not on a environmental topic, but it's more on a solution that we have developed just a few days ago for the COVID-19. So we'll talk about this after the takeaway part. And of course, we will also be doing more webinars in the coming months. So make sure that you are fans of our LinkedIn page so you know what's going on. Right. So let's go to the Q&A. So the first question that we have on hand is, what is the definition of green factory?
Okay, yes, this is a very good question because and when I was in Bangladesh, I was yes, every day reading an article from the local news saying this factory is now a green factory, or BGMEA saying that there are I don't know how many green factories in the country. Yes, what does it mean, green factory? This is not an official, how can I say, it's not a certification or standard. There is no green factory certificate. When it is used in Bangladesh, I know that most of the time it means that indeed it is related to the standard LEED, which I mentioned before, which is about the factory building. If a factory has a LEED, was LEED certified, the factory will say, I'm a green factory. However, I think we need to be careful about this. When a factory is saying I'm green, you definitely need to investigate to understand what the factory means. It's a general term. It can be associated easily with greenwashing, so it's better not to use too much this term. I don't recommend anyone to say I'm working with a green factory. It's not very accurate. It's much better to describe in a different way what the factory has been achieving. So if a factory has a LEED certification, you should mention specifically which grade of LEED was achieved. Otherwise, it's better to be more specific and to say my factory was audited against this standard and got this result. This will be more accurate.
So I've seen also one question which is quite interesting. So I guess it's the problem or the difficulties that many buyers or suppliers are facing. So one of our participants asked, since there are so many different certificates available in the industry, does it make it very difficult to choose which one is appropriate or suitable for them to use?
Yeah. So it's difficult to answer to this question in a simple way, but I'm trying to turn the thing differently. I think the starting point is, what do you want to do? Because based on what is your objective, you will know which standard or certification you need. You cannot do everything. You cannot have all your factories being having a 100% how can I say, a perfect environmental management system. You cannot be sure that 100% of your factories are not using hazardous substances, or you cannot be sure that all your factories will make water and energy savings. You need to decide what is your priority. Based on what is your priority, you know what could be you will see what is the most suitable solution. Do you want to focus on the product, for example? Do you decide, okay, my priority is to make sure my product are done with organic fibers. In this case, I will look at certificate specific to organic fibers product. This is one approach. If you want to focus on environmental assessment, I definitely suggest that you look at the audit standards options that you have. Don't think that a label or a certificate is going to be the guarantee that your factory is not polluting. I saw on some websites of fashion brands that are categorized as ethical, small fashion brands. They say our products are standard 100, Ecotech standard 100 labeled, so it means there is no pollution from the factories. This is not true. So be very careful about as well what you are saying. If you want to control the pollution from the factories, I recommend the environmental audits, whatever is the standard, but it's an environmental audit on site. So it depends on what you want to do. If your focus is chemicals, for example, you say a strategy of the brand is addressing the reduction of hazardous substances in the production. This is your priority. You should look at what ZDHC is proposing. You should look at what the audit companies can offer as support to work on this specific topic of chemical. So again, my suggestion, you start by identifying what you want to do. Do you want to focus on a product? Do you want to focus on hazardous substance? Do you want to focus on the pollution of factories? These are three, let's say, main strategies. Based on this, you will ask the organization and company what are the best tools they can propose. But you need to know what you want to do.
So I think let's take one more question, our last question. So Francesca, any questions that you would like to answer?
Yes, I'm looking at the question. So I will try to answer this question. So the question in how accurate is the information from the IPE regarding the pollution map of China? Has this been assessed by any other organization? So the information which is available on IPE map is coming from the local authorities. Okay, so it means that if in a specific region in China, the local authority came on site and they did an assessment, and they published the result, and the result is the one IPE is publishing. So it's coming from the government. What I know is that the factories have the possibility to demonstrate to IPE that they corrected the non-compliances, and they provide the evidence, and in this case IPE can change the information on the database. Now I know there is as well some audit and verification proposed by IPE with certified auditors. So I'm not a 100 expert of IPE, so I will definitely look at I will better look at IPE website to answer better this question. But at least you have to remember that the information published is from the government.
Okay. So for the remaining questions, don't worry. Francesca will, like she has done before, follow by email. So I'll let Francesca to finish with the takeaway.
Yes, okay. So the takeaway of this last webinar is that there are different solutions and tools for different needs. For audits, you can look at what is proposed by Higg FEM or Amfori BEPI and all the audit company solution. What is important is to define your criteria to select an audit solution. So again, here you have some example of criteria that you can take into account when you have to select an audit solution, about how well known is the standard, to which extent the audit questionnaire is detailed and accurate about critical topics, what are the what is the system to qualify the auditors, of course your budget, and if the access to a platform for monitoring is important for you or not. This is really depend on the number of suppliers you need to monitor. Other organizations offer open source public information about specific topics, such as the Roadmap to Zero, or ZDHC, for hazardous chemicals in the production. And remember that there is also IPE in China for the mapping of compliance data in China related to environmental topics. So if you are starting with this topic of environmental assessment, don't hesitate to have a look to the website of these initiatives. It can be very interesting and good for your general knowledge. Be careful about certification scope. Whatever is the certification you are interested in, you must check carefully what does it cover. Is it for the facility or for the product in terms of restricted substances, or for the products in terms of origin of fibers, or if it is organic or not? Okay, you need to be very clear about what is the scope of the certification. And again, before you just look at the certifications, if you're starting from scratch, you need to know what you want to achieve. Based on what you want to achieve, you will see what are the solutions that you have. Contacting organization and audit companies, they will for sure help you to understand what is the good direction to take. Of course, we will be more than happy if you contact us if you have any questions about standards and certification. So thank you very much for all the people who attended the 4 webinars and thank you for the people who just joined today. I was very, very happy to share my knowledge with you, and yes, I hope to see you again soon in new webinars, maybe tomorrow for our workspace health solution. I let Fiona explain it.
Yeah, and so Francesca's email is there. So as you can see, Francesca also won an online training website, and you can see the online training website there. And you can just go there and pay for the e-learning. And as we have just mentioned, we have recently launched a new solution for the workspace health solution for the COVID-19. So Francesca and I will also doing a very short briefing webinar tomorrow on this new solution. I'm pasting the link in the chat box, so in case you are interested, so you can register for the space, and I hope we'll see you again tomorrow. If we don't see you again tomorrow, that's okay. We'll still hope that we'll catch cross again soon. And until we meet again, take care, everyone. Thank you very much for your support in this month for all the webinars we have done. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a good day.